The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as Zektar stepped forward, his 6 arms trembling despite his best efforts to remain composed. The massive crystalline hall stretched before him, filled with representatives from over 200 civilizations. Every eye, antenna, and sensory organ focused on the Craxi warrior who had once been considered among the galaxy's most fearsome fighters. "Honored members," Zektar began, his voice carrying across the chamber through the universal translators. "I stand before you today not as the proud warrior I once was, but as someone who has witnessed something that has shaken me to my very core. 3 cycles ago, our fleets encountered the species known as humans for the first time. A ripple of interest passed through the assembled delegates. The humans were still relatively new to galactic politics, having only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last century. Most civilizations considered them primitive, barely worth notice except for their unusual persistence in exploration. We believed them to be another weak species," Zektar continued, his natural armor plates shifting nervously. "Their ships were crude, their weapons simple, their numbers small compared to our mighty armadas. When the border dispute arose over the Kepler mining zone, our commanders laughed at the suggestion of negotiation. Why waste time talking when we could simply sweep aside these newcomers? The Craxi had been spacefaring for over 10,000 years. Their warrior culture had conquered dozens of systems, and their reputation for ruthless efficiency in battle was legendary throughout the galaxy. They were tall, powerful beings with natural armor plating and multiple limbs that made them formidable in both space combat and ground warfare. The first engagement seemed to confirm our assumptions," Zektar said, his voice growing quieter. "Our dreadnought Thunder of Crax faced off against a small human patrol fleet. 5 of their ships against our flagship and its escort squadron. The humans' vessels were ugly things, all angles and exposed machinery. Nothing like our sleek bioships grown in the deep nurseries of our homeworld." He paused, remembering that first battle with crystal clarity. The human ships had seemed so fragile, their hull plating thin compared to the living armor of Craxi vessels. When the first exchange of fire began, it appeared the conflict would end as quickly as it had started. But something was wrong from the beginning, Zektar admitted. When we opened fire with our plasma cannons, expecting to see their ships vaporize instantly, they did something unexpected. Instead of trying to flee or surrender, they charged directly at us. Not in formation, not following any tactical doctrine we recognized, but in what appeared to be random, chaotic patterns. The assembled delegates shifted uneasily. Charging headlong into superior firepower was considered either the height of stupidity or desperation by most galactic military doctrines. Our gunners struggled to track them, Zektar continued. These human ships moved like they were alive, rolling and weaving in ways that defied logic. They took hits that should have destroyed them, yet kept fighting. When one of their vessels lost its main engine, we expected it to drift helplessly. Instead, the crew used their maneuvering thrusters to spin the ship like a weapon, using their damaged hull as a battering ram. The memory sent a shiver through Zektar's exoskeleton. He had been on the bridge of the Thunder of Crax, watching the tactical displays with growing confusion, as the human ships refused to behave according to any known combat patterns. But the truly disturbing part came when we finally disabled one of their ships, he said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. Standard protocol dictated that we board and secure any survivors for interrogation. What we found when we cut through their hull haunts me still. The chamber was completely silent now, every being hanging on Zektar's words. The ship's atmosphere was barely breathable, thick with smoke and the stench of burned electronics. Emergency lighting cast everything in a hellish red glow. But the humans inside weren't cowering or begging for mercy as we expected. They were still fighting, even though their ship was crippled and their weapons destroyed. Zektar's 6 arms gestured helplessly as he tried to convey what he had witnessed. They had fashioned weapons from broken pieces of their own ship. Metal pipes, shattered hull plating, anything they could use to continue the battle. When my squad entered their engineering section, We found crew members who had been severely wounded still working to repair their damaged systems, even as their own blood pooled around them. The Craxi warrior's natural armor had begun changing color, a sign of deep emotional distress among his species. One human female, her arm clearly broken and her face covered in burns, looked directly at me and said something in their language. The translator rendered it as, "You picked the wrong species to mess with." Then she tried to attack me with a piece of twisted metal. Several delegates exchanged worried glances. The idea of a severely wounded being attempting to continue fighting was difficult for most civilized species to comprehend. "We subdued them, of course," Zektar said quickly. "But their behavior troubled our medical teams and interrogators." Under questioning, the human prisoners showed no fear, no regret, only a burning anger that seemed to grow stronger with each passing moment. They spoke constantly of their backup and how their friends would be coming soon. The warrior paused again, gathering his courage for what came next. "We assumed this was typical bravado from defeated enemies. Every species claims their reinforcements are on the way when facing capture. But 6 hours later, our sensors detected incoming ships. Not a rescue mission or negotiation fleet, but a full battle group moving at maximum speed directly toward our position." A murmur of unease rippled through the chamber. Most species approached prisoner exchange situations with diplomacy and caution, not overwhelming force. "The human ships didn't even attempt to communicate," Zektar continued. "No demands for our surrender, no offers to negotiate the return of their people. They simply arrived and immediately opened fire with weapons that seemed impossibly powerful for their level of technology." The Craxi warrior's tale was beginning to paint a picture that many in the chamber found deeply disturbing. The humans were displaying a level of aggression and coordination that suggested something far more dangerous than a simple primitive species, stumbling through their first interstellar conflicts. The human rescue fleet arrived like a force of nature, their ships emerging from hyperspace in perfect formation despite their apparent haste. Zektar watched from the bridge of the Thunder of Cracks as his tactical officers scrambled to analyze the incoming threat. What they discovered defied everything the Craxi thought they knew about warfare. "Their ships were still crude by our standards," Zektar continued his testimony, "but they moved with a precision that spoke of countless hours of training and coordination. More disturbing was their complete lack of hesitation. Most species would attempt to negotiate, perhaps threaten retaliation if their people were harmed. These humans simply began systematically destroying our escort vessels." The chamber of delegates remained eerily quiet as Zektar described the battle. His natural armor plates had shifted to a deep purple, indicating profound stress among his people. "What happened next revealed the first glimpse of the truth that now terrifies me," he said, his voice growing stronger despite his obvious discomfort. "Our bioships began taking damage at an impossible rate. Human weapons, which our intelligence had classified as primitive kinetic projectiles, simple energy beams, were cutting through our living armor like it was soft tissue." Delegate Morthek of the hegemony leaned forward, his crystalline features reflecting concern. "Surely your defensive systems adapted as designed." Craxi bioships are legendary for their ability to evolve countermeasures during combat. Zektar's 6 arms made a gesture of profound helplessness. "That's just it, honored delegate. Our ships tried to adapt, but the humans kept changing their tactics faster than our biosystems could respond. One moment they were using concentrated beam weapons. The next they switched to some kind of explosive projectiles that seemed to home in on our most vulnerable systems." The Craxi warrior moved closer to the center of the chamber, his movements still showing the subtle limp he had acquired during the battle. "But the most unsettling discovery came when our science officers analyzed the human weapon signatures. These weren't random improvements or lucky technological breakthroughs. Every modification, every tactical shift was specifically designed to counter our exact defensive capabilities." A collective intake of breath echoed through the chamber. The implications were staggering. "They knew us," Zektar said flatly. "Before we ever encountered them, before our species had any contact whatsoever, The humans had somehow studied our ships, our tactics, our weaknesses. They came to that battle prepared for us specifically. Delegate Sonara of the Peaceful Collective spoke up, her melodic voice carrying concern. Perhaps they had access to galactic databases? Many species share tactical information for mutual defense. That was my first thought as well, Zektar replied. But our investigation afterward revealed something far more disturbing. The humans had not simply studied existing data about Craxi military capabilities. They had somehow observed our actual combat techniques, analyzed our ship designs in detail, and developed countermeasures that went beyond anything in the galactic databases. The warrior's testimony was painting a picture that many in the chamber found difficult to accept. The idea that a supposedly primitive species could conduct such sophisticated intelligence gathering without detection was deeply troubling. During the battle, our communications intercepted human transmissions, Zektar continued. Their tactical coordination was unlike anything we had encountered. They didn't just communicate orders. They shared real-time analysis of our weaknesses, updated threat assessments, and coordinated attacks with a speed that suggested their decision-making process was somehow accelerated. He gestured to a holographic display that materialized above the chamber floor, showing tactical data from the engagement. Watch this sequence. At timestamp 1432, one of our vessels attempts an emergency evolution, growing additional armor plating to counter their beam weapons. Within 30 seconds, the humans had identified the new configuration and switched to a completely different attack pattern specifically designed to penetrate that exact type of adaptive armor. The display showed the human ships moving in complex patterns, their weapons fire creating precisely timed sequences that systematically dismantled the Craxi defenses. 30 seconds, Zektar repeated. From recognition of our adaptation to deployment of an effective counter-strategy. Our best military analysts would need hours to develop such precise tactical responses. Yet these humans did it in less time than it takes to recalibrate a targeting system. Delegate Kremuth of the warrior caste stood up, his massive frame towering over the other representatives. You suggest these humans possess some form of enhanced collective intelligence? Perhaps a hive mind structure? No, honored delegate, Zektar replied quickly. Our psychic scanners detected distinct individual consciousness in each human ship. They were not operating as a hive mind, but as separate beings who somehow achieved perfect coordination through methods we could not identify. The implications were becoming more unsettling with each revelation. A species that could achieve hive mind levels of coordination while maintaining individual consciousness represented a form of tactical advantage that most galactic civilizations had never encountered. The battle lasted 6 hours, Zektar continued. During that time, we observed the humans employing tactics that seemed to violate basic principles of space warfare. They used their own disabled ships as weapons, detonating power cores at precisely calculated moments to create debris fields that channeled our movements into prepared kill zones. He paused, remembering the systematic destruction of his fleet. More disturbing was their apparent willingness to sacrifice themselves for tactical advantage. When one of their ships took critical damage, instead of attempting to withdraw or minimize casualties, the crew would deliberately fly into our formation, using their dying vessel as a weapon. The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs. Deliberate self-sacrifice for tactical gain was considered an extreme action even among the most militant species. But the most terrifying moment came near the end of the engagement, Zektar said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. When our flagship was finally disabled, and I found myself facing capture by human boarding parties, I expected the same treatment we had given their people. Instead, their leader approached me personally. The Craxi warriors' armor plates were now cycling through colors rapidly, a sign of extreme emotional disturbance. The human commander was a female, smaller than any of my warriors, showing obvious signs of exhaustion from the prolonged battle. But her eyes held something I had never seen before in any sentient being, Not hatred, not anger, but a cold, calculating assessment that made me feel like a specimen being studied. Zektar's 6 arms trembled as he continued. She spoke to me in perfect Kraxi, not through a translator, but in our actual language with proper grammatical structure and cultural inflections. When I expressed surprise, she smiled and said something that will haunt me for the rest of my cycles. The human commander's words echoed in Zektar's mind as he stood before the Galactic Council. Her exact phrase burned into his memory with terrifying clarity. She had leaned close to him, her small frame somehow more intimidating than any Kraxi battle leader he had ever faced, and spoke in his native tongue with perfect pronunciation. "We have been watching you for a very long time. Zektar of the Thunder Clan," she had said. "We know your real name, your family lineage, your personal combat history, and your greatest fears. We know because we have been preparing for this day since before you were born." The chamber fell into absolute silence as Zektar repeated those words. The implications were staggering. How could a species that had only achieved interstellar travel within living memory have been observing individual members of an alien civilization for decades? "I demanded to know how this was possible," Zektar continued, his voice steadier now as he approached the heart of his testimony. The human commander, who identified herself only as Admiral Chun, explained something that shattered every assumption I had about their species. He activated another holographic display, this one showing what appeared to be a timeline stretching back over 2 centuries. According to Admiral Chun, humans had detected signs of galactic civilization long before they achieved faster-than-light travel. Instead of rushing to make contact as most species do, they spent over 200 years secretly observing us. Delegate Morthek leaned forward, his crystalline features reflecting the chamber's lighting in complex patterns. "Impossible. No species can observe interstellar distances without detectable emissions. Our sensor networks would have identified any surveillance attempts." Zektar's armor plates shifted to a deep blue, indicating profound unease among his people. "That's what we believed as well. But Admiral Chun showed me evidence that their observation methods were unlike anything we had conceived. They weren't using traditional sensors or probe ships. They were using something they called passive intelligence gathering through cultural analysis." The holographic timeline expanded, showing intricate details that made several delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. The humans had intercepted our communications, our entertainment broadcasts, our cultural exchanges, even our private transmissions, and had been analyzing them for patterns. They didn't just learn our languages. They studied how we think, how we make decisions, how we respond to stress and conflict. Admiral Kremuth stood again, his massive frame radiating skepticism. "You suggest they achieved detailed psychological profiles of entire civilizations through intercepted communications? Such analysis would require computing power beyond the capabilities of most advanced species." "That's exactly what I told Admiral Chun," Zektar replied. Her response was what truly began to terrify me. She said that humans had developed something they called distributed cognitive processing. Instead of relying on powerful computers, they had trained their entire population to contribute to the analysis effort. The concept was so alien to most galactic civilizations that several delegates requested clarification through their translators. The idea of an entire species working together on intelligence analysis was unprecedented. According to Admiral Chun, human children are taught from an early age to recognize patterns, analyze behavior, and contribute observations to massive collective databases. What would take our most advanced computers years to process, human civilization accomplishes through millions of individuals, each contributing small pieces of analysis. Zektar gestured to the timeline again, highlighting specific points. "They showed me records of their analysis covering not just the Kraxi, but every major galactic civilization. They had detailed psychological profiles of our leaders, tactical assessments of our military capabilities, economic analyses of our trade networks, and cultural studies that predicted how we would respond to various scenarios." The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs as the full scope of human surveillance became apparent. Every major species in the galaxy had apparently been studied without their knowledge for decades. But Admiral Chun wasn't finished revealing the extent of their preparation, Zektar continued. She explained that humans had not only observed us, they had been actively preparing countermeasures for every possible conflict scenario. The weapons they used against our fleet weren't newly developed. They had been designing and testing anti-craxy systems for over 50 years. Delegate Sinara of the Peaceful Collective spoke up, her melodic voice carrying deep concern. You imply they were planning for war before any contact was established? This suggests a level of premeditated aggression that violates every principle of civilized first contact. Zektar's 6 arms made a gesture of profound confusion. That's what disturbed me most, honored delegate. When I accused them of warmongering, Admiral Chun seemed genuinely puzzled. She explained that humans always prepare for the worst possible outcomes while hoping for the best. She said they had also developed detailed plans for peaceful cooperation, cultural exchange, and mutual benefit. The warrior moved closer to the center of the chamber, his movements showing the weight of what he was about to reveal. Admiral Chun then showed me something that broke my understanding of strategic thinking entirely. The humans had not just prepared for conflict with us. They had prepared for conflicts involving every possible combination of galactic species. A new holographic display materialized, showing an incredibly complex three-dimensional matrix of interconnected scenarios. They called it their Comprehensive Threat Assessment Matrix. It contained detailed analyses of how every known civilization might react to conflicts with every other civilization, what alliances might form, how economic factors would influence political decisions, and how various technological advantages might shift the balance of power. The complexity of the display was staggering. Lines connected thousands of different scenarios, showing cascade effects and probability assessments that would challenge even the most advanced galactic supercomputers. The matrix wasn't just theoretical, Zektar continued. It included specific countermeasures, tactical plans, and resource allocation strategies for every possible configuration of galactic conflict. The humans had essentially gamed out every conceivable future and prepared responses for each one. Delegate Varkov of the Scientific Collective raised a tentacle in question. Such comprehensive analysis would require resources beyond the capability of a single species. How could they possibly gather sufficient data and processing power? Zektar's armor plates shifted to a sickly yellow, indicating deep fear among his people. That's when Admiral Chun revealed what truly horrified me. She said that every human who travels to other worlds, every diplomat, trader, tourist, or researcher, is trained to observe and report. Their entire species functions as an intelligence network, constantly gathering and analyzing information about everyone they encounter. The implications sent a chill through the chamber. Most galactic civilizations relied on professional intelligence services for such work. The idea of an entire species being trained in intelligence gathering suggested a level of collective paranoia that was difficult to comprehend. But the most terrifying revelation was yet to come, Zektar said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Admiral Chun explained that the reason humans seem so aggressive and unpredictable in combat is because they have studied every military doctrine in the galaxy and specifically trained to counter them. He paused, allowing the full weight of his words to sink in. They don't just adapt to our tactics during battle. They arrive already knowing exactly how we fight and precisely how to defeat us. The weight of Admiral Chun's revelation pressed down on Zektar as he stood in the damaged human ship, surrounded by warriors who had just systematically dismantled his supposedly invincible fleet. But the human commander wasn't finished with. Her explanations and what came next would reshape his entire understanding of their species. Admiral Chun then told me something that initially seemed impossible. Zektar continued his testimony before the Galactic Council. She said that humans had not only studied our military doctrines, but had actually tested their countermeasures in controlled environments. They had built exact replicas of our ships, trained their people using our tactical manuals, and conducted thousands of simulated battles to refine their responses. Delegate Kremoth's massive frame shifted with disbelief. Replicas of Craxi bioships? Impossible. Our living vessels require genetic material and growth techniques that are closely guarded secrets of our species. Zektar's armor plates cycled through deep purples and blues, indicating extreme emotional distress. That's exactly what I told Admiral Chun. Her response was to escort me to what they called their analysis bay. What I saw there will haunt me for the rest of my cycles. The holographic displays around the chamber shifted to show detailed technical schematics. The humans had not built perfect replicas of our bioships, but they had created something arguably more impressive. They had analyzed our vessel's performance characteristics so thoroughly that they could simulate every aspect of their behavior using conventional technology. The schematics showed human ships modified with adaptive armor systems, regenerative hulls, and distributed neural networks that mimicked the biological advantages of Craxi vessels. But these weren't just static copies, Zektar continued. The humans had improved upon our designs, eliminating weaknesses we didn't even know existed. Their simulated bioships could perform every function of our actual vessels, plus capabilities we had never conceived. Admiral Chun had walked him through the analysis bay like a proud engineer showing off her greatest achievement. Human technicians worked alongside artificial intelligence systems, constantly updating their simulations based on new data. Every Craxi tactic, every weapon system, every defensive measure had been replicated, tested, and ultimately surpassed. Admiral Chun explained that this process wasn't unique to our species, Zektar said, his voice growing quieter. They had similar analysis facilities for every major galactic civilization. Rooms full of simulated hegemony crystal ships, artificial, collective harmony networks, replicated warrior caste battle formations. The humans had essentially created a virtual galaxy where they could test strategies against every possible opponent. The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs as delegates realized the implications. Their most closely guarded military secrets had not only been discovered but had been turned into training tools for potential human adversaries. But the most disturbing aspect wasn't their technological achievement, Zektar continued. It was their attitude toward it. Admiral Chun spoke about their surveillance and preparation efforts as if they were the most natural thing in the galaxy. When I asked her if humans considered all other species to be potential enemies, she looked genuinely confused. He had been expecting anger, pride, or at least some acknowledgement of the massive intelligence operation they had conducted. Instead, Admiral Chun had seemed almost surprised that he found their behavior unusual. She told me that humans always assume others might be hostile, not out of paranoia or aggressive intent, but because they consider it irresponsible not to be prepared, Zektar explained. Admiral Chun said that in human culture, failing to plan for conflict is considered a betrayal of their duty to protect their own people. The cultural implications were staggering. Most galactic civilizations approached interstellar relations with varying degrees of trust and optimism. The idea of a species that automatically assumed potential hostility from everyone they encountered suggested a fundamentally different worldview. Admiral Chun then showed me historical records from their home planet, Zektar continued. Thousands of years of constant warfare, betrayal, and survival struggles that had shaped their entire approach to existence. She said that humans learned long ago that the species that survives is the one that prepares for every possible threat. The holographic displays shifted to show images from human history, ancient battles, technological developments driven by military necessity, and the constant cycle of conflict and innovation that had defined their civilization. But what truly terrified me was her next revelation, Zektar said, his voice barely audible now. Admiral Chun explained that everything I had seen, all their preparation and analysis capabilities, represented only their basic defensive measures. She said that humans had classified our encounter as a minor border dispute and had responded accordingly. The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. If this had been a minor response, what would a major human military operation look like? I asked Admiral Chun what would have happened if our species had posed a more serious threat. Zektar continued. She showed me tactical assessments that assumed full-scale galactic warfare involving multiple civilizations. The humans had plans for scenarios involving simultaneous conflicts with dozens of species, coordinated attacks on their territory, and even complete isolation from galactic civilization. The scope of human strategic planning was beyond anything the galaxy had seen before. Most species planned for conflicts with their immediate neighbors, perhaps forming defensive alliances with compatible civilizations. The humans appeared to have planned for war with everyone simultaneously. Admiral Chun told me about something called strategic depth doctrine, Zektar said. Humans had identified backup planets, hidden construction facilities, and distributed resource networks that could sustain their civilization even if their core worlds were destroyed. They had prepared for losing and still continuing to fight. The concept was alien to most galactic thinking. Civilizations typically surrendered when their core systems were threatened, choosing survival over continued resistance. The idea of a species that would continue fighting even after losing their homeworld was deeply disturbing. But the most chilling moment came when Admiral Chun casually mentioned their contingency plans for species-level threats. Zektar continued. When I asked what that meant, she explained that humans had identified certain scenarios where they might face extinction and had developed response protocols accordingly. The chamber fell completely silent as delegates contemplated what species-level threat responses might involve. Most civilizations had survival instincts, but few had formalized planning for existential scenarios. Admiral Chun spoke about these plans as if they were routine military doctrine, Zektar said. Protocols for complete galactic warfare. Strategies for fighting multiple technologically superior civilizations simultaneously, and contingencies for scenarios where humans might be the last surviving intelligent species in the galaxy. The sheer scope of human planning was beginning to paint a picture that many delegates found impossible to accept. A species that planned for surviving galactic extinction events suggested a level of strategic thinking that bordered on obsession. When I finally asked Admiral Chun why humans went to such extremes in their planning, her answer revealed the truth that now terrifies me, Zektar said, his armor plates now a steady, deep black indicating profound fear among his people. She looked me directly in the eyes and said, "Because we learned long ago that the universe is a dangerous place, and the only way to protect what we love is to be more dangerous than anything that might threaten us." Admiral Chun's words hung in the air of the damaged human ship like a death sentence, and Zektar realized he was witnessing something far more significant than a military defeat. He was seeing the true nature of humanity revealed for the first time, and the implications were reshaping his understanding of the galactic balance of power. After Admiral Chun spoke those words, Zektar continued his testimony. She invited me to witness something she called a standard operational briefing. What I observed in that briefing revealed the depth of human preparation that goes beyond anything I could have imagined. The Galactic Council chamber remained silent, every delegate hanging on the Craxi warrior's words as he described what would become known as the most significant intelligence revelation in galactic history. The briefing room was filled with human officers, each one receiving updates on dozens of ongoing operations throughout the galaxy, Zektar explained. But these weren't military operations in any sense we would recognize. They were calling them cultural integration protocols and defensive positioning initiatives. He activated another holographic display showing a star map of known galactic civilization. Admiral Chun showed me the scope of current human activities. They had embedded observers in every major galactic civilization, not as spies in the traditional sense, but as what they called cultural analysts and early warning specialists. The map displayed thousands of points of light, each representing a human presence within alien civilizations. The density of coverage was overwhelming, suggesting that humans had achieved a level of galactic penetration that no intelligence service had ever accomplished. Every human trader, diplomat, researcher, and tourist was part of this network, Zektar continued. But they weren't operating under false identities or conducting covert missions. They were simply humans doing normal human activities while simultaneously gathering and reporting information about everything they encountered. Delegate Sonara of the Peaceful Collective raised a concern. Surely such widespread surveillance would be detected by local security services? Zektar's armor plates shifted to a sickly green, indicating nausea among his people. That's what makes it so terrifying, honored delegate. The humans weren't conducting surveillance as we understand it. They were simply being curious about everything around them, asking questions that seemed natural, observing details that appeared irrelevant, and sharing their experiences with other humans. The implications were staggering. Traditional intelligence operations relied on trained agents conducting specific missions with clear objectives. The humans had apparently turned their entire species' natural curiosity into an intelligence network. Admiral Chun explained that humans call this distributed situational awareness, Zektar said. Every human automatically notices things like how local security responds to emergencies, what technologies are considered advanced or primitive, how political decisions are made, what fears and hopes motivate different species. The holographic display showed examples of typical human observations, travel journals that included detailed notes about infrastructure, trade negotiations that revealed economic vulnerabilities, cultural exchange programs that mapped social hierarchies, and scientific collaborations that exposed technological capabilities. But what truly horrified me was learning about their pattern recognition protocols, Zektar continued. Humans don't just gather information. They constantly analyze it for signs of potential threats or opportunities. Admiral Chun showed me reports where human observers had identified political instability, technological breakthroughs, resource shortages, and military buildups months or years before official intelligence services detected them. The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs as delegates realized that human observers might have been tracking developments within their own civilizations that their own governments hadn't yet recognized. Admiral Chun told me that humans had predicted our border conflict with them. 3 years before it occurred, Zektar revealed. They had analyzed our economic pressures, our territorial expansion patterns, our military doctrine evolution, and our leadership's decision-making processes. They knew we would eventually attempt to claim the Kepler mining zone because they understood our species better than we understood ourselves. The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled delegates. The idea that an alien species could predict their political and military decisions with such accuracy was deeply unsettling. But prediction wasn't enough for humans, Zektar continued. Admiral Chun explained that once they identified a potential conflict scenario, they would begin preparation cascades. These weren't just military preparations, but comprehensive efforts to position themselves advantageously in every possible aspect of the coming conflict. The holographic display showed the complexity of human preparation for their border dispute with the Craxi, economic positioning to control critical resources, diplomatic outreach to potential allies, technological development focused on specific Craxi weaknesses, and cultural analysis to understand how the conflict would be perceived by other galactic civilizations. They had spent 3 years preparing for a conflict that lasted 6 hours, Zektar said, his voice filled with awe and terror. But Admiral Chun explained that this level of preparation was considered routine for humans. She said they maintained similar preparation levels for potential conflicts with every major galactic civilization simultaneously. The scope of human strategic planning was beginning to dwarf anything previously seen in galactic civilization. Most species maintained defensive preparations for immediate neighbors and perhaps 1 or 2 potential threats. The humans appeared to be constantly preparing for warfare with everyone. Admiral Chun then revealed something that shattered my understanding of human society, Zektar continued. She told me that their extensive military and intelligence preparations weren't managed by their government or military organizations. They were coordinated by what they called citizen participation networks. The concept was so alien to most galactic civilizations that several delegates required clarification. The idea of civilian populations voluntarily participating in military intelligence operations was unprecedented. According to Admiral Chun, human civilians consider it their civic duty to contribute to their species' survival preparations, Zektar explained. Children learn pattern recognition and threat assessment as part of their basic education. Adults routinely analyze potential scenarios and contribute ideas for improvement. Retired military personnel develop training programs for civilian volunteers. The holographic display showed examples of human-civilian contribution to military planning. Neighborhood groups that practiced emergency response scenarios. Amateur analysts who studied alien technologies. Volunteer networks that maintain backup communication systems. And citizen scientists who developed new defensive technologies. Admiral Chun said that humans call this species-level responsibility, Zektar continued. Every human considers the survival of their entire species to be partially their personal responsibility. They don't rely on governments or military organizations to protect them. They actively participate in their own protection. The cultural implications were staggering. Most galactic civilizations had clear divisions between civilian and military populations, with security being handled by specialized organizations. The idea of an entire species participating in survival planning suggested a level of social cohesion and shared purpose that was difficult to comprehend, but the most terrifying. Revelation came when Admiral Chun explained how humans view other galactic civilizations, Zektar said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. She told me that humans assume every other species is potentially as dangerous as they are and plan accordingly. The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. If humans considered themselves the baseline for potential threat assessment, and they had demonstrated capabilities far beyond anything previously seen in galactic civilization, then their threat assessments for other species would be correspondingly extreme. Admiral Chun said that humans don't trust the apparent peace and stability of galactic civilization. Zektar continued. They believe that every species is capable of becoming as militaristic and dangerous as humans themselves, given sufficient motivation. They prepare for the possibility that any civilization might suddenly become an existential threat to everyone else. The chamber fell into stunned silence as delegates contemplated the implications. A species that assumed everyone might become as dangerous as themselves would naturally develop extreme defensive capabilities and maintain constant readiness for galactic-level warfare.